morning! Today we're on the next block in our wool stitch-along project, the Parrot. Getting back into making these videos after my surgery, I had a bit of a filming glitch on my version. So Beth will be helping with this block so you can see some parts I missed.
I'm happy to help out. This has been a fun project.
We're both ready to go, so let's get started. Off camera, both Beth and I placed and stitched down all the appliques using the matching colored wool threads and a blanket stitch, just as we have for all of the pieces in the previous blocks.
For the decorative stitching, we'll start with a little outlining on the branch the bird stands on. This is the one thing I did that BJ decided not to do, so you can see how it looks both ways. I used a straightforward triple stitch, number 6 on the Bernina, so it's subtle either way. I used a brown 12 weight spaghetti thread, number 21, that's just a hair lighter than the wool. I also added just a little texture by running a stitch down most of the middle of the log. I think this gives it a little depth and helps it to not poof out as much. The next part is outlining the blue part of the bird's body here. I'm going to be using this thread to couch down 2 strands of this 8 weight variegated thread. This is a 12 weight fruity thread, FT01, and this is Easy M1027, which has some blue and some green and yellow highlights. For the couching, I'm using a slightly longer than usual zigzag with a stitch length of 2.0 to try and get some of the effect of the hand stitch that Wonderfil used. Here are some of the test stitches I made. The first used the default settings for the stitch width, and the yellow thread took over too much. The middle sample was 1.75 width, but I think I like the 2.0 width better, so I'm going to use that. You can still consistently see the yellow, but it doesn't overwhelm. So let's go. I want to end just before the wing starts. Turning the sharp corner is difficult, so go slowly and take it stitch by stitch. Also, be careful when you have the brown log on the other side.
On my version, I did the outline with the blue variegated thread, which has a more subtle effect and a little cooler color profile, so you can see a couple of options for how you want your bird to look.
There we go. Now we'll do what I would call kind of a necklace decoration around the bird's neck using the lime green spaghetti thread. I'm going to try and mimic what Wonderfil did here. They call it a Basque stitch, which I think looks nice. I'm going to use a stitch that I designed here. It takes a couple of regular stitches and then stitches a diamond to one side and then goes back down the main stitch line. I like how that came out. Now I'm going to go back to stitch number 6 for the basic triple stitch for outlining his head. I think anything else will add too much to the outline.
I used a chain stitch here, so it stands out just a little more.
For outlining the wing, I'm couching down 2 strands of the 8-weight yellow pearl cotton number 204 with an orange, slightly variegated fruity thread.
You'll see mine is a bit different. I used a bigger straight zigzag and a more intensely variegated red and yellow fruity thread.
On the bird's cheek, I stitched 1 repeat of an asterisk or a star shape using a gold-yellow spaghetti thread. The trickiest part is starting the stitch in the right place so it's not too high or too low. I'm doing the decorative stitching on the wing with the same thread, stitching 3 lines of an open fly stitch, which looks kind of like the feathers here.
For my wing decoration, I used stitch 523. It's a spiraling design that goes back and forth over a wide area, but then narrows at the end, kind of like the wing does. For the feet, I broke it down into 2 parts, the legs and the claws. I used stitch number 8 for the legs. The default is too wide, but I narrowed it to 2.7 width and shortened the length to 1.35 so it's a bit denser. For the claws, I found that 1 repeat of stitch 136 looks like it should work. I just made it a bit wider.
For the feet on mine, I used a chain stitch for the legs and then just a triple stitch for the talons. The trick is spacing the legs and talons so they are the right position and right distance apart. Okay. It's time to stitch the bird's beak, which is right here. I finally decided I'm going to use stitch 406. At first, I was thinking about using 401, but that makes the satin stitch go back and forth. This one will end up with the stitches going up and down, which I think will work better. I have flipped and reversed it so I can start here. I also had to modify the percentage down to 60% to get the right size, and I had to adjust the shift numbers a bit too. I'm going to make a final practice run first, though. I'm not sure why it made the extra stitches at the end. I'm going to lower the top tension so it pulls a bit more towards the back. That looks about right. I'm stitching with the buttons to make sure it stitches just a single repeat. The next thing I want to do is mimic the bullion knot here. I'm going to use a basic zigzag stitch with the width at 3.75 and a length of 0.5 to give it a nice evenly filled but not too full zigzag. BJ did her beak almost the same, but I think she used a stitch for the beak that ended up a bit larger. Mine ended up a bit smaller. You might want to go somewhere in the middle of what we did. Okay, one more.
For the stems of the plants, I wanted to give them a bit more width and substance this time to mimic the Pekingese stitch they use. I chose stitch number 10, which goes back and forth in a loose zigzag between two border lines. I drew a chalk line to help guide approximately where I want this to be, and I'm more or less just following that curve. I'm using a 12-weight cotton fruity thread that's a variegated green. Their Pekingese stitch looks a little bit like a zigzag over their center thread. I may stitch over this with a little bit of a zigzag too. The stems have some offshoots as well. They use more of a stem stitch or whip stitch for these, but I think the triple stitch would look right here. I'm also using the triple stitch for the veining and outline of the plant leaf. After the first center line, though, I decided it needed a solid dark green instead of the variegated thread. So I'll stitch over the center line with a new thread. I basically finished this except for the strawberries. I think what I'm going to do is to get a bit of wool and make an applique patch for each of them and stitch it down.
Like BJ, I used chalk to mark out the path for the stems. For my stitches, I'm using a chain stitch with a width of 3.0 and a length of 6.0. It's the same stitch I used on the bird's legs, but a bit longer. I'm using a variegated green fruity thread. I think the same thread BJ used for her stems. On the other stem, I'm starting from the bird and making my way up. Like BJ, I'm using a triple stitch for the smaller offshoot from the main stem. Here I'm using the knee lift to raise and lower the foot. It makes it easier to see what I'm doing to control the tight curve and check how far down I want the stitching to continue. One more. I've switched to stitch number 1, the plain straight stitch. I lowered the tension so the threads will be pulled to the back with a default length of 2.5. I'm going to go through the center of this stem as best I can. I like how it bisects the stitch and gives it a nice extra line. For the outline, I'm using Spaghetti SP42. with a triple stitch, so the outlines and veins on mine will be more of a light green compared to the dark green BJ used. Otherwise, we pretty much did the same thing. For the strawberries, BJ and I got some red wool and we each cut the strawberry shapes to make appliques, which we're stitching down with a regular blanket stitch. Just to finish off the strawberries, I'm going to make a couple of triangle stitches, much like the chain stitches, so they look like small leaves that you get on top of a strawberry. I'll probably just do 2 on a strawberry, 3 would look too busy. BJ did something similar, but with a slightly different decorative stitch. I'm going to go ahead and bury these threads and see what else I need to do, but I think we're actually done at this point.
We hope you all had fun with your own versions of the parrot. I've been keeping busy filming these, so we'll see you soon with the next video.
Bye for now.